Mega Man 7, despite being a left field release, was a triumph in the eyes of many critics. But despite that fact, it wouldn't be till the next generation of consoles that we'd see old Jump and Shoot Man in his classic form again. And the fashion with which Capcom decided to bring him back was actually quite controversial, but I was unsure as to why going into this game. I mean, it's a classic series game after all, how different can it be? Now having played it for myself, it's all making sense, but you guys are probably still left wondering, so let's get into it.
One of the biggest additions to this game is these FMV anime cutscenes. Of course, watching these without audio, you'd be under the impression that they're great, and they are, visually at least. Every character looks accurate to their in-game depictions, the animation is fairly fluid for anime standards of the time, and the general visuals are gripping. However, any immersion this game has built up with the opening cutscene is immediately broken as soon as the characters open their mouths.
Hey, Zach! Why must I fight you? We are not enemies!
Shut up!
Look, the criticisms levied against this game's voice acting are numerous, and it's kinda redundant for me to shit on these voices even more, but it just has to be said. Could Capcom seriously not have afforded a better voice acting team for one of their flagship franchises? Hell, they didn't even have to do that. They could have just let their voice actors have more than one take per line. I mean, what the fuck is this?
You must recover all the energy immediately, Mega Man.
There are also voice lines during gameplay, such as the Robot Masters taunting you before taking you on. These aren't as egregious, but it still doesn't make up for the poorly delivered lines in the cutscenes. Not only are these lines poorly delivered, but they don't mean anything either. None of the cutscenes have a bearing on the actual plot of the game, because as always, it just boils down to Wily being the big bad you have to defeat at the end of the game. So yeah, absolutely fucking pointless.
The cutscenes may have been a bit of a blunder, but luckily they didn't take away from the general in-game presentation, which if you ask me, is the best in the series. In terms of audio, past the questionable voice acting, you have some great tracks. Thanks to the PS1 being a CD-based system, it allowed for CD quality audio, and it definitely shows. While maybe not the cream of the crop when it comes to classic series music, this soundtrack is definitely something to savour. The variety in terms of different instruments and sounds is really refreshing to hear after 7 games of nothing but beeps and boops.
The soundtrack also makes you realise what the composers of the past 7 games are going for, and makes you appreciate the soundtrack even more, since they managed to achieve so much with such a limited sound font. And now you're kind of seeing their vision realised, even if some of the tracks are a little different to the pre-established classic series sound. Moving on to the visuals, everything looks absolutely incredible. I'm in love with the pixel art in this game. The art style is definitely my favourite in the series. Even Mega Man himself looks better. He looks a little more in line with what classic series fans are used to. This is helped by the fact the game is a little more zoomed out, something fans kind of complained about in 7. The environments in this game are really varied. Every stage correlates with its respective Robot Master, making the stages arguably the most cohesive in the series. They do a great job at giving you a little taste of the Robot Master's personality, so to speak. You almost feel like you've got to know the Robot Master a little before fighting them, and it's really cool. The stages in this game are also longer, which not only gives you more playtime, but checkpoints between sections, so if you die you're not sent back to the start, which is a nice change. However, with longer stages, the developers were probably worried about making an already repetitive formula even more repetitive, so they decided to introduce some stage gimmicks to spice things up. This is where the controversy comes in. From what I understand, a lot of people hate these stage gimmicks, and understandably so. You have a multitude of different ones, and while most are inoffensive, there are a couple that really stick out to me as horrible. First, we have this weird fucking maze in Astroman stage. I don't really see what this section offers past being a slog to get through, and you can barely call it a maze anyway, because once you figure out the layout, it's basically just about hitting the right button so you can exit the area. And then there's a snowboarding section in Frostman stage, which shows up more than once, mind you. These sections can suck the fattest dick and choke on it. Holy shit do they suck. I enjoyed them a little at first, but after failed attempt after failed attempt, I was done. The pixel perfect precision required, paired with the constant jump, slide, ringing my ear got on my last fucking nerve.
Although I do have to stress, even though the snowboarding section probably took a good 5 years off my life, I'm still not that opposed to these more gimmicky puzzle platformer elements. Sure, they make the levels feel a little all over the place, but with that messiness comes a lot of uniqueness.
Whether you love or hate Mega Man 8, you can't call it samey or derivative. It actively disrupts the classic series formula in a notable way, and while you could argue whether it's a good disruption or not, for me personally it was a good one. The uniqueness and personality found from stage to stage more than makes up for the occasional annoying moment in my eyes. And if that doesn't help, there's a whole ass shop run by Roll, where you can buy a bunch of different upgrades with bolts you'll find scattered around every level.
Now, one thing I neglected to mention in this video is the fact that I played the Legacy Collection version of 8, which is actually a port of the PS1 version of this game, but there was actually a Sega Saturn port as well. While this version isn't too dissimilar to the PS1 version, it does have a couple extras like extra bosses and improved graphics that make it the definitive version to many. Unfortunately, I don't have that version of the game, or a Sega Saturn for that matter, so I can't properly compare and contrast, but I thought it was worth mentioning regardless. But whether you play the Sega Saturn version or the PS1 version, in my opinion, I think you're in for a good time. While this game is very divisive and I can't guarantee you'll love it, I think this game has a lot to offer if you're going with an open mind, and don't mind the occasional gimmicky puzzle section in your platformers.